Good morning again, Scott here, known as Cantaloupe to some online, and I'm bringing another video to you on a subject that's interesting to me. It might be of interest to you or someone you know. And I want to talk about BMX riding. I'm going to kind of freestyle in this video. It's a loose subject, and I'm going to meander a little bit. Be warned, it's not going to be as perhaps focused and cohesive as some of my videos, but this is intentional. So I want to talk a little bit about my history growing up. When I was young, BMX was a huge thing. BMX, if you're not familiar, is bicycle and motocross. The half bike, the smaller bike that sometimes is for kids, but isn't necessarily. Adults can ride them, and they used to ride them a lot. There were even bike parks around everywhere when I grew up. It's funny, you don't see them anymore. I'll speak for myself. I have not seen a bike park in many, many years. I assume they have all been closed down due to the predictable injuries and hazards. But here's my point in this video. I do have something to say about it. We have become obsessed with safety. We being California and the United States, the Western civilization at large. Safety sells. Safety is hailed as one of the highest priorities at all times. And yes, I understand when people get hurt, it's terrible, it's tragic, and it can be extremely painful, not just for the person, but for their families and people who care about them. And it's all bad. But to resist destroying the freedom of others is, if you ask me, the one job of our administrators. All of the other jobs they do stem from this one overarching objective, if you ask me. That is to say, our leaders, such as they are, have a responsibility to not ruin everything with their policies. And I understand that just like with crime, we have to prepare for things to happen. We have to react to it to some degree, but to just say that nobody has freedom anymore, to say that all of the parks are going to be closed because somebody got hurt, to say that it's too much of a liability risk for people to skateboard or bicycle in public spaces is going too far, if you ask me. Because, now here's the point, not everybody falls down. Okay, all right, so this connects obviously with a bigger subject. The bigger subject is, why have human beings become graceful? Okay, you might not agree with the theory of evolution. You might not agree with the findings of the late Charles Darwin. You might believe in creationism. You might believe in both evolution and creationism, or you might just be an atheist and believe only in science and what's called evidence-based decision making. I respect all of these perspectives. I'm not trying to sell anything in this video. I'm not trying to influence you or your thinking necessarily. I'm trying to perhaps share some observations that I believe are true, and it makes sense to me. I'll just say that it makes sense. The theory of evolution makes a lot of sense to me because there's plenty of evidence. There's a preponderance, as they say, of evidence, not just in fossil records, but in everywhere we look, as far as connecting the actual data, the historical items, the anthropological items, the biological research that has been done for centuries. It all seems to point to a gradual process that involves mutation, adaptation, natural selection, and survival of the fittest. Okay, so with this in mind, I just want to recap what evolution actually is. Survival of the fittest, natural selection, that is thinning of the herd, the stronger, more capable and able individuals end up living longer, on average, over the course of millions of years, reproduce, pushing their own genetic copy forward, whereas the others get culled, and it's brutal, it's brutish, I should say, sometimes in the jungle. Okay, so back to the subject. In our society, safety sells, right? Safety sells because of the brutish nature of evolution, but there's the trade-off. Of course, there's the trade-off. And this is what nobody talks about. I want to talk about it because just for the sake that nobody is saying it, nobody has been talking about the trade-offs of safety being the overarching, all-encompassing, all-consuming goal for everybody. Someone's making a decision on your behalf right now to keep you out of trouble. And now, as a result of this idea that safety is always best, we have some things that aren't so great, such as superbugs, for one. We have penicillin resistance And, all of the antibiotics that have been effective since they were invented have lost traction in medicine, in the medical world, because they were overprescribed. Now, why does that happen? Because viruses are semi-alive. They're not technically alive because they cannot reproduce on their own. They need a host, but they are adaptive is the point. And when you overprescribe something, just like if you overprescribe safety, there is a dynamic and reciprocal reaction over time. It's a four-dimensional situation, which escapes people, unfortunately. This connects with another subject, and I want to digress just for a second. So a lot of people think that anybody can be trained to do just about any job. They think that everybody's born equal with equal potential, unless they're categorically retarded or whatever. And you can train them, given the right economic backing and education. Anybody can do any job. No, that's just not true. Okay, it's not true. Some people have a hard time thinking in four dimensions. Okay, my point here is that looking forward, anticipating things, understanding not just what a thing is now, but what it will very likely become and its implications in terms of health and happiness in this case. It's very difficult for people. Most people actually have a hard time anticipating. Granted, nobody's born with a crystal ball. You don't need one, though. There's something called intuition. There's something called actual experience, having the insight and intelligence that may be above average, average, or below average, and we're not all the same. Some people can foresee things. There's a phrase. I love this phrase. If I have seen farther than other men, it is because I've stood on the shoulders of giants. To give credit where credit is due. And it connects with my subject here about safety and BMX bikes, in that in the 80s, there was a lot more freedom in general, for better and worse in the short term, but pretty much just for the better in the long term. If you can see past the fact that we got a little closer to nature than was comfortable for a lot of people. What happened was we started to see evolution creeping back in, a little bit of a thinning of the herd, which is all that was, honestly. And maybe it's easy to say, I'll take that one. Maybe it's easy to say that being risky or empowering and allowing by policy risky things like bike parks to exist, it's easy to say until it's you or your loved ones who are hurt, right? Who are bleeding out next to the double tabletop or whatever because they cut their foot off on their bike because they did it wrong. Okay, I understand. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm not even making a vote either way. I'm just saying there's a trade-off that people aren't talking about. Okay, understand, that's my point. There's a trade-off that if you eliminate all of the risks, you also, in the same gesture, eliminate the potential rewards. And in this case, you need those rewards to stay alive as a species. I'm not making this up. Okay, so our solution, I don't want this to be a big, long video, but our solution as a culture, as a society, to counterbalance our votes for safety, our policies that err on the side of caution, is to inject good genes, quote unquote, back into the population. This is what we do. We try to route people with healthy, robust, superior, if you want, genetics to parenthood. We try to make them into genetic super spreaders, if you will. And we justify this by saying the alternative is to embrace evolution in all of its horror. And it can be horrible. As horrible as seeing your kid laying unconscious next to the double tabletop. But here's the thing. That is a short-term solution to a long-term problem. I hear a lot of people say we're doomed, okay? Humanity's doomed. We just can't figure it out. We're doomed this way or that way or 10 different ways. Okay, but every single one of those ways you just mentioned, such as the problems with medicine, such as the problems with economics or technology or whatever you're saying our doomsday is coming from, all have solutions, if only you'll hear them. Every single one of them has a solution, a pretty simple one, actually, when you come down to it. And the real problem, if you ask me, is that people don't want to listen and they don't want to change. They're on the payroll, they're on their couch, they're on their bottle of whiskey, and that's the end of it. That's the end of their conversation. They want you to leave them alone. They want to sit back with their safety and their whiskey and live out their days in a domestic graveyard. Well, unfortunately, we are at the end of our time, not just in my video, but in terms of what we can continue to accept and allow as far as sacrifices of nature in our culture. So back to the original point. BMX riding is a lot of fun. I know that was circuitous, but there's a lot to be said. I love riding a bike, and yeah, I crashed into a whole bunch of stuff, and somehow I'm still alive. Vast majority of people, they do just fine. They might, skin a knee or even break a bone, and I'm not suggesting they do, but I'm suggesting that if you disallow it, because some people do, it gets much, much worse. Much worse. Count your blessings. Understand the trade-offs. Delegate your choices to people who have your interests and are able to make them properly. Don't think you can do everything by yourself if you can't. That's all I'm asking. Reach out if you like with questions or comments to whitehotrobot@gmail.com. Thank you.